Most trawlers do not die from age. They die from what was hidden inside the hull the day they were built. A trawler sitting in a saltwater slip right now with a freshly buffed hull and a low hour meter can have a mild steel fuel tank already rusting from the inside, a stringer quietly absorbing water under a teak deck, and dissimilar metals corroding a through hull fitting from behind where no survey ever looks. Nobody disclosed that at the point of sale. Nobody put it on the listing. The saltwater environment does not care how the boat looks today. It finds every path water is allowed to travel and destroys every material that was not specifically engineered to resist it for decades, not years. The difference between a trawler still fully sound at 30 plus years and one headed for a scrapyard at 15 is not luck, and it is not maintenance alone. It is a set of construction decisions made before the hull ever came out of the mold. There are exactly 7 trawler platforms that get those decisions right and have the documented real-world ocean crossings and circumnavigations to prove it. Here is what they are, what specifically makes them survive, and what the trawlers that do not survive have in common. Before the list, you need the 3 mechanisms that end most trawlers decades before their time, because without understanding the failure, you cannot recognize the fix. The first is core rot. Most trawlers built before the 2010s use teak decking over a plywood or balsa subdeck, and the moment a fastener hole goes unsealed or a seam opens, rainwater and condensation feed rot into a structure that looks solid from above, while the deck underneath turns soft. Surveyors describe this as the most commonly underestimated failure mode in used trawler inspections, because the fiberglass skin on top can look flawless while the core beneath it has already lost its strength. The second is galvanic corrosion, the same electrochemical process that eats an underwater hull fitting from the inside the moment 2 dissimilar metals sit in salt brine together. The less noble metal in that pairing gives up electrons and corrodes at an accelerated rate, whether that is an aluminum component touching stainless hardware or a bronze fitting left unisolated, and the damage happens from the inside before any surface deterioration is visible. The third, and the one specific to trawlers more than almost any other boat type, is the mild steel fuel tank. Decades of production trawlers, especially those built in Taiwan and Hong Kong through the 1970s and 80s, used tanks made of ordinary steel instead of a corrosion-resistant material installed into the hull before the deck ever went on. Once rainwater finds its way to the top of that tank through a poorly bedded fill fitting, it rusts from the inside out until it perforates, and replacing it means cutting the engine room open to crane the old tank out in pieces. The 7 trawlers on this list were engineered around all 3 problems from the keel up, not patched around them after the fact. Here is how. Nordhavn, built by Pacific Asian Enterprises since the first hull splashed in 1989, refuses to core the hull below the waterline at all. It is solid laminated fiberglass with vinyl ester resin, reinforced by longitudinal and transverse stringers, with watertight bulkheads separating major compartments. Even the fuel and water tanks are molded fiberglass instead of metal, which means the exact tank corrosion that kills other trawlers cannot happen on a Nordhavn. The design philosophy traces directly back to Robert Beebe's 1975 blueprint for voyaging under power, the book that essentially invented the Passagemaker category. The result? More than 150 ocean crossings and 8 full circumnavigations, including the fastest circumnavigation ever completed by a production powerboat, with the builder stating no Nordhavn has ever suffered a structural failure that was not the result of a collision or a fire. Kadey Krogen has built one hull philosophy since Art Kadey and Jim Krogen founded the company in 1976. The pure full displacement hull with its signature wine glass transom, hand laminated in fiberglass with vinyl ester resin for blister resistance, switched to closed cell PVC sandwich core in the decks, starting in 1985, specifically to eliminate the wood rot risk that plagues older trawlers. More than 650 Krogens have been built across nearly 5 decades, and the original Krogen 42 stayed in production almost unchanged from 1976 to 1998, still one of the most sought-after used trawlers on the water today, backed by a domestic dealer network that means a common engine problem gets solved by a local mechanic instead of a specialist flown in from out of state. Fleming Yachts has been built exclusively at the Tung Hua Yard in Taiwan since Tony Fleming, a 20-year production engineer at Grand Banks, founded the company in 1985. The superstructure and decks are cored with core cell foam, a material that cannot rot the way teak-covered plywood does, and the semi-displacement hull carries full RCD Category A ocean certification. The Fleming 55 has stayed in continuous production since 1986, one of the longest unchanged production runs of any yacht hull built today. Fleming personally logged more than 60,000 nautical miles aboard his own boat, including a circumnavigation of Iceland, feeding what he learned directly back into construction. American Tug, built in La Conner, Washington since the late 1990s, traces its hull heritage to naval architect Lynn Senor and the Pacific Northwest commercial fishing fleet. Every hull is hand-laid fiberglass using resin infusion technology, and every deck is molded as a single piece with no seams, eliminating the exact leak point that rots the decks on older trawlers. Production stays vertically integrated, with key components built in-house and inspected at every stage, rather than farmed out to whichever yard has capacity that month. Consider subscribing if this kind of construction breakdown is useful before you buy. Willard was the world's first production builder of fiberglass trawler yachts, starting in Costa Mesa, California in 1961 under founder Bill Teig, before Grand Banks or Krogen existed. The Willard 40 uses a hand-laid, 100% solid fiberglass hull divided into 3 watertight compartments with separate bilge pumps, and the company states plainly that none of its clients have ever reported a hull failure. That engineering was credible enough that the United States Coast Guard awarded Willard its first government contract in 1976 for 56 patrol boats. Willard stopped building recreational yachts in 2003 to focus on military and commercial vessels, but the boats already on the water keep proving the construction out decade after decade. Arthur DeFever designed more than 3,800 vessels across his career, starting with commercial tuna clippers built to stay at sea for weeks at a time chasing fish down the coast of Central America, and that commercial DNA went straight into the DeFever 49 raised pilot house. Built from the 1970s into the early 2000s, the 49 became known among surveyors for hull laminate so thick that 2-inch solid fiberglass plugs have been drilled from it, a more is better era of construction that simply shrugs off the breaking seas that stress lighter hulls at the joints. DeFever joined the Offshore Cruising Society in the early 1960s, specifically to design powerboats capable of the same long-range passages sailboats were making, and the 49 still carries that original mandate in its bones. The same solid glass, no-core, fiberglass tank standard that defines the full Nordhavn line is built into the Nordhavn 41, the smallest model the builder currently offers, replacing the earlier Nordhavn 40 that once held the record for the fastest circumnavigation ever completed by a production powerboat. Built using the same vacuum-bagged, resin-infused construction as Nordhavn's largest flagships, at a Turkish yard, using the identical hull lamination schedule the company specifies for every size in the range. The 41 proves the standard was never reserved for the buyers with the biggest budgets. What makes it relevant to this list is not the smaller footprint. It is the fact that the same engineering keeping 50-foot Nordhavns crossing oceans decades in is present, unchanged, at the accessible end of the lineup. The construction credentials of a brand answer how a trawler was built. The condition of one specific used hull answers what has happened to it since, and both questions need an answer before money changes hands. Run a moisture meter across the entire hull and deck. Readings above 12% are elevated, and readings above 15% indicate active intrusion. Pull the engine room sole and look directly at the fuel tank material, not just the fuel gauge. If it is mild steel and the boat is more than 15 years old, budget for replacement regardless of what the seller claims. Check every through hull and shaft fitting for corrosion where dissimilar metals meet, and look for powder coat bubbling around any aluminum to stainless connection, since that is a sign galvanic corrosion is already working underneath the surface. Ask how the boat was stored, since a trawler kept on a lift ages at a fraction of the rate of one left sitting in a saltwater slip year-round, and that single variable changes the expected condition of every system on board. Get a compression test on the engine regardless of what the seller says about hours, and factor every deferred maintenance item into your offer before you write a number. Saltwater does not negotiate. It does not care about the asking price, the hours on the meter, or how fresh the paint looks. The only question that matters on the dock is whether the hull in front of you was engineered to resist what saltwater does over 30 years, not just survive a sea trial. The 7 trawlers on this list were built to do exactly that, by builders who made the hard, expensive decisions before the hull ever left the mold, instead of hoping a buyer never finds out what is underneath. Every other trawler is a variable. Subscribe, because next I am covering the specific construction failures hiding inside the trawlers flooding the used market right now, and what they actually cost the buyers who did not know what to look for.